Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel for another episode of the Routes Learning series recorded within Train Simulator. In this episode, we're going to be taking a look at the freeware North East England network, which is available from DP Simulation, and I'm going to be driving a journey from York on the East Coast Main Line through to Sunderland in Tyne and Wear, leaving the East Coast Main Line at Northallerton and heading on towards the Durham coastline. The scenario that I'm using is created for this video specifically, set sometime around the year 2010. We'll be following the timetable of train 1 November 90, which is the 8:27 AM Grand Central service from London King's Cross through to Sunderland, which departs York at 10:25. Stops along the way will include Thirsk, Northallerton, Eaglescliffe, Hartlepool, and finally Sunderland, with a total journey distance of just over 77 miles. I originally planned to do this video set in the year 2022 with a Grand Central Class 180, but due to issues in driving the Class 180 without the HUD, I've decided to revert back to a time when HSTs were still used on this route alongside Class 180s, and specifically the Valenta engined HST, to make things more interesting. It's not often I get a chance to drive an HST with the old Valenta engine, and I absolutely love how they sound, and I love that scream as they power up. It's just one of my earliest memories is of trains, well, should I say Valenta HSTs, so it really does bring some nostalgia out in me. The train that I'm driving is a 5-coach Grand Central HST formed of 2 Class 43 power cars with buffers and 5 Mark III coaches. The Class 43 diesel electric locomotives were built by British Rail Engineering Limited at Crewe Works between 1975 and 1982, with a total of 197 of these locos produced. They were originally fitted with the Paxman Valenta engine, although in the early 2000s most locomotives had their engines changed to the MTU engine and some to VP185 engines. VP185 engines had started to be used in the 1990s and the MTUs came about in the early 2000s. By 2010, only 2 HST power cars still retained the original Paxman Valenta engines, which were Grand Central locomotives Class 43 number 43084 and 43123, which are the 2 locomotives on this train today. Each engine has a maximum power output of 2,250 horsepower, giving a total power output for this train of 4,500 horsepower. Each locomotive weighs just over 70 tonnes, and the maximum speed for these trains is 125 miles per hour, which we will be able to get up to on the first part of this journey today between York and Thirsk. I've just jumped into the cab of the HST to quickly look at the controls here. We are starting, of course, mid-journey, so I've already set up the cab ready for departure as it would be in real life. The only thing that I haven't done for now is put the reversing handle into forward. It's left in neutral, so the driver safety device doesn't keep going off. I just wanted to talk about the controls briefly. So on this side, we've got the throttle control, which is a 5-notch throttle. Generally, when starting the HST moving, we're going to go up to notch 3 very quickly, and then we're going to allow the train to take power and we'll accelerate away, and then I'll gradually go up to notch 5, normally around 15 to 20 miles per hour. It really depends on the length of the platform, as from what I understand, drivers weren't really supposed to accelerate up to full power until the rear of the train has cleared the platform. Just to the right of the throttle control, of course, we've got the AWS plunger there, and then just to the right of that we've got a very funny looking, very small horn control, which is a two-tone horn, controllable with the space bar and the B key. Now, continuing around the cab here, we've got the clock just there, then we've got the ammeter, which measures the number of amps that the engine is generating, well, the electrical amps that the engine is generating, times 100, as you can see there. So generally it goes up to about 1,500 amps. I don't think it gets up to 2,000 normally when we're powering up. And then to the left of that, we've got the speedometer measured in miles per hour. As you can see just above that, the maximum speed is listed as 125, and you've also got the red marker on the speedometer. Just to remind you again that the maximum permitted speed for this train is 125 miles per hour. Though it should be pointed out that on a special test run, this locomotive achieved the world record for the fastest diesel locomotive of 148 miles per hour. Continuing around the cab here, we've got the 3 brake gauges, but the main gauge that we're looking at is the middle gauge there, which is the brake cylinder pressure gauge. So you can see the 2 needles there. If I release the brakes, then they drop towards 0. The higher those needles are pointing, then the harder the brakes are applied, and 0 means the brakes are fully released. Below that, we've got the brake controller. So this is a 6-step brake. So we've got the release position there, and then you've got initial apply, which is step 1. You've got step 2, 3, 4, 5, step 6, which is full service, and then there is finally an emergency setting, which if I put it up there, it doesn't actually give you any extra brake force in the brake cylinders, as you can see. Generally, I try not to brake above step 4. There are going to be a couple of points on this journey where I'll probably end up going up to step 5 unintentionally, just to ensure that we're going slow enough in time. So yeah, now that we've set up, well, had a look at the cab of the train here, we're now ready to depart and head out on our journey towards Sunderland. As we depart away from York, the speed limit here is 30 miles per hour with just over 22 miles to go to the first stop, which is Thirsk. And so I'm just cutting the power now just as we're reaching 30 miles per hour. I'm going to allow the train to coast until we're able to accelerate further. So the speed limit's going to be shortly going up to 50 miles per hour and then very quickly increasing to 60 almost immediately after that. In fact, the acceleration point is going to be at the 60 mile per hour speed post. So now passing the 50 mile per hour speed post, and then we've got a signal just ahead, and then the 60 post is very quickly after that. Okay, so we can now start accelerating up towards, well, 60 miles per hour, because the train certainly doesn't accelerate quick enough to be doing 50 before the rear of the train's past the 60 post. Passing one of the ex-GNER East Coast trains Class 91 sets, so for a while they still sort of had the GNER colours, the dark blue and red there, although they were rebranded as East Coast trains. I'm just going to cut the power back for a moment as we're approaching 60 miles per hour. We're just about to pass the 125 mile per hour speed post. We're going to be doing 125 pretty much all of the way to Thirsk, till we have to slow down for a junction as we cross onto the slow line just before Thirsk Station. I have to say, one of the good things about the shortened HST sets being only 5 coaches is that the acceleration rate is so much better than a full-length HST, and we can certainly get up to 125 miles per hour a lot quicker than you'll see me reach that speed in most other videos that I've done within an HST. very long straight section of track. I don't think there's many curves between here and Thirsk, maybe just one or two. So it's just long, dead straight section of track. So you can certainly see why the speed limit is able to be 125 along here. The East Coast Main Line's always been faster than the West Coast Main Line, of course, because the West Coast Main Line is much more curvy than the East Coast, and that's why you require tilting trains to do 125 on the West Coast. But on the East Coast Main Line, you don't need tilting trains to be able to reach that speed. So we're now coming up on the maximum speed of 125 miles per hour. Once we get to 125, we need to go between notches 2 and 3 of power to maintain that speed. So this is a relatively easy section of the route to learn and drive. Certainly between here and Northallerton there's not a huge amount to learn. Once we get past Northallerton, the speed limits on the route are actually going to be considerably lower. I think the maximum speed's around 70 miles per hour, but there's going to be a lot of small speed changes that we need to remember, and that's where the challenge really lies, in remembering all those little speed changes, often with no warning posts that an upcoming speed change is coming up, because the speed changes are so small. So while we're going along here with not much to do, just to give you a bit of a taster of upcoming videos, so I'm hoping to get released very soon a Class 185 video between Barrow in Furness and Preston, and in addition to that I'm also looking to do the Crewe to Holyhead run, which a lot of people have been asking me about, and that will be in a Class 175 in Transport for Wales livery. And then I'm also looking to try and get the Ramsgate to Victoria run done quite soon in a Southeastern Class 375. And following on from that, I'm looking to try and get probably 3 or 4 Train Sim World 2 videos done. So I just want to focus on just Train Sim World 2 for 3 or 4 videos before coming back to Train Simulator once again, but I haven't decided on all of the Train Sim World videos that I'm going to be making yet. I do know that one of them is going to be on the Brighton Main Line, and it's going to be Reigate to London Victoria. I thought I'd do something a little bit different rather than a straight through London to Brighton run, as that route has appeared on this channel quite a few times in the past, of course. And then I'm looking to do something German, maybe something American, so we'll see how it goes. But do check out my Facebook page, PTG Rail, as I do try and keep that updated with some of my upcoming plans. What I'm looking out for along here now is a flashing double yellow signal, which is going to warn us that we're coming up towards the junction where we turn off towards Thirsk. So at the flashing double yellow signal, we've got just over 2 miles to go to Thirsk Station, and then of course after that we'll have a flashing single yellow signal, and then a solid single yellow signal. And once we've reached the solid single yellow signal, well, there's a 40-mile-per-hour speed limit for the junction just immediately after that signal. Can now see that the next signal is a flashing double yellow, so I'm going to cut off the power now, and I'm going to start applying the brakes. I'm going to make an initial step 2 brake application to start bringing our speed down, and as we approach the flashing single yellow I will increase the braking up to step 4. Speed should be coming off quite nicely now. I have just increased the braking slightly more as I'm just not entirely confident in myself that we're going to slow down quick enough, and I definitely don't want to be exceeding 40 for that junction. Okay, I can cut the braking back now as we are slowing down a little bit too quickly. I probably actually didn't need to step up to step 5 braking. I think step 4 would have been fine. For anyone who's travelled on an HST, I'm sure you'll know that if you're using step 5 braking, those brakes really do smell. There's this really strong burning smell from the brakes as you're slowing down. So now we're down to 40. I'm just going to allow the train to coast. As you can see, we've got the feather indicator there, indicating that we're crossing the junction to the left. Shortly after crossing the junction, we will then reach Thirsk Station, and at Thirsk, I want to stop at the end of the platform. So now I've crossed the junction, I'm going to put the brakes on once again. I don't really want to be entering the platform at any faster than 30 miles per hour at top, so I've just made a step 2 brake application, which is bringing our speed off quite nicely. And now I'm increasing the braking. And I think we should be braking just about right to stop at the end now. Oh, maybe slightly too quick. Just a quick increase of the braking, and let's now pull it back a bit. Doesn't matter if the locomotive overshoots the end slightly because it's not a very long platform here. So we should now be stopped in roughly the right place. As we depart away from Thirsk, the speed limit here, well, it was 60 miles per hour, and it's immediately going up here now to 90 miles per hour, with around just under 8 miles to go to the next stop at Northallerton. I also did note that, of course, we had a solid single yellow signal before stopping at Thirsk, and there's no driver reminder appliance on this train, so I had to remember that, but we did have a repeater, and I could see that the signal ahead is now displaying a green aspect. So we're going to accelerate up towards 90 miles per hour. Once we get to 90, we need to go between notches 1 and 2 of power to maintain the speed. So now we're approaching 90. I'm going to cut the power back now, so we're now in notch 3. And as we get to 90 itself, I'll drop to notch 2 and then notch 1. So as we get towards Northallerton, we're going to cross back onto the track to the right, so we can go into Northallerton Station at a junction called Longlands Junction. And I noticed in the real timetable that this train's actually scheduled to stop at the junction to let another train pass and go into Northallerton first. So we will be stopping at a red signal at the junction until this train's passed, and then we should be able to proceed into Northallerton Station. So we've now got a single yellow signal coming up just ahead. I'm now going to immediately apply the brakes to start slowing down. We've only got around 3/4 of a mile to go from this point to the upcoming red signal, so I'm going to brake quite hard to ensure that we are down in speed in time. The Voyager that just overtook us isn't the train that we're going to be waiting for, just to say, at Longlands Junction. It's actually an East Coast train service that's going towards Edinburgh or Glasgow. I can't remember which one off the top of my head. So now coming up on the red signal, you can see just ahead. For the junction itself, there is a drop in the speed limit down to 70 miles per hour. So now we're going to stop just in front of this red signal here, and then I'm just going to pan to some shots of the trains going past until the signal is clear and we're able to proceed towards Northallerton Station. Okay, so the signal has now cleared. I did get a nice shot of the train going past, the one towards Edinburgh or Glasgow, but it decided, Train Simulator decided it wasn't going to load the DVT at the other end, so it looks very, very odd, and I wasn't sure if I should include it in the video or not, so I'll have a think about that, and if you see it, then I decided to include it, and if you don't, then yeah, I didn't want anything so ridiculous to appear. So yeah, the signal's cleared. We're now cleared to the next signal. The speed limit's now dropped to 70 miles per hour. At this point we've got around, I'm just checking now, yeah, around 1.5 miles to go to Northallerton Station. So I'm not going to accelerate much above 30 miles per hour as that signal was displaying a single yellow aspect. Now I've reached 30, I'm just cutting the power back now. I'm going to shut off the power as presumably we're going to have to stop at the next signal. The train that passed us is stopping at Northallerton Station, so it will delay us for a moment. And you can now see the red signal coming up just ahead, so I'm just going to make a light brake application to start bringing our speed down in time for that signal. So we're just crawling up to the signal now. I'm kind of hoping that the train clears Northallerton before we have to fully stop, but I'm not sure if it will do or not. Okay, so we are going to have to stop in front of the signal, and yeah, the signal should clear in a moment, but I will stop the recording just to cut down that time. And the signal's now clear. It actually only took about 30 seconds, so now we can head into Northallerton Station. We've got around 3/4 of a mile to go at this point. I'm just going to whack this up to full power now. I love hearing the scream of that Valenta engine. It's great to give it that thrash. And as I said, it's not very often that I get to drive the Valenta engined HST, as most of the journeys that I drive in the HST use the newer MTU engine, which just doesn't sound as good. One of my earliest railway memories is the fact of the screaming Valenta HSTs at Newark Northgate Station on the East Coast Main Line. So I'm cutting the power back now. There's not much point in accelerating much above 35-ish. We're approaching the platforms at Northallerton, which are staggered, so the platform on the right hand side that you can see coming up is closer to us than our platform. Giving us some light braking now to start slowing us down. Here at Northallerton, I want to stop near the end of the platform. Just cut the braking back momentarily, so I thought we were going to stop a bit too early. I'm aiming to stop around the second platform light away from the end of the platform. So we're just coming up on the third away from the end now, and the next platform light, I want to stop roughly next to that. Okay, we should now be stopping in just about the right place. As we depart away from Northallerton, the speed limit is quickly dropping to 25 miles per hour for this junction here as we turn away from the East Coast Main Line. So I've just cut the power back now. I'm just going to allow the train to coast for a moment. We've got around 14.5 miles to go at this point to the next stop, which is Eaglescliffe. So immediately after the junction, the speed limit's gone up to 40 miles per hour, and we can accelerate towards that just as we pass the signal for the opposite track that we passed just now. There is a down 1 in 100 grade towards another junction that we're going to be passing in a moment, so I just do need to bear that in mind, but we can accelerate up towards 40, and I'm going to cut the power back at around probably 35-36 miles an hour. Now I'm going to shut off the power and use the brakes to control the speed if we do exceed 40 miles per hour. The speed limit's going up to 60 miles per hour immediately after the junction, and the gradient has now levelled out. We've got around a mile to go to an upcoming 55 mile per hour speed limit. Sorry, correction, around a mile to go to an upcoming 40 mile per hour speed limit. I was reading the wrong part of my notes for a moment there. So now we're approaching 60, I'm going to cut the power back, and then I'm going to apply the brakes for the upcoming 40 mph speed limit at this upcoming signal. So I was down to 40 in time. We've now reached the 40 mph speed post. The speed limit will shortly be going back up to 60 miles per hour, and then when it does, we've got around a mile to an upcoming 55 limit. So that's the bit I misread a moment ago. We can accelerate up towards 60 as we reach the rear of the signal, just coming up on the opposite track. So I've now cut the power back to idle. At this signal just here, we've got around a third of a mile to go to that upcoming 55 limit. So I'm just going to brake very lightly in step 1 in a moment as we see an AWS ramp on the opposite track. So that ensures that we're down to 55 in time. As the speed limit drops to 55, we've got just under half a mile to go to an upcoming 50 limit. So I'm just going to allow the train to coast at this point. And we're just coming up on the 50 speed post now. I should have actually braked at that crossing. We were slightly further along than I thought, so we might have entered that 50 zone at about 52, but it's okay. So as the speed limit dropped to 50 miles per hour, we've got around 11.25 miles to go, and at this point I need to go between idle and notch 1 of power to maintain the speed. I must say, travelling at 50 miles per hour after we've just been doing 90 and then 125 certainly feels very slow. Feels like a bit of a drag along this section. Thing is, I can't actually see why this would be 50 miles per hour along this section. We've got very long signal sections and it's completely straight. I'm guessing it's something to do with the maintenance of the track, but sometimes I can't work out why certain speed limits are posted, either too low or sometimes I don't understand it. Just to say the speed limit has just gone up to 70 miles per hour, just to interrupt my train of thought there. But yeah, sometimes I also don't understand it when the speed limit, say, goes from 50 to 90 to 60 in like half a mile or something. And it's like, no train would ever reach 90 before they've got to slow down for 60. So if anyone knows why things like this are done, please do let me know in the comments. So now we're up to 70 miles per hour. I once again need to go between idle and notch 1 of power to maintain the speed. Certainly a very bumpy bit of track. I noticed this on my practice runs through the journey. I don't know why this particular section of track does this, but the train just suddenly violently swings from side to side. Guess they need to get the maintenance people out. This level crossing just here, so you've got this hut on the left, that little porter cabin and the big house on the right. We've got around 7 miles to go to Eaglescliffe. We're now coming up on Yarm Station with just over 2.5 miles to go. The first signal out of Yarm Station is 1 3/4 miles from Eaglescliffe, and it is currently displaying a single yellow aspect. And if this one is at single yellow, it means of course we're not cleared into Eaglescliffe Station, and we've got around a mile to go to the upcoming red signal. So as we start crossing this rather long viaduct here, I've put on the brakes to start bringing our speed down. I want to ensure that we're going slow enough as we approach the next signal coming up. And you can now see the signal ahead, so I've got the brakes on a bit harder now to ensure that we slow down in time. Here at Eaglescliffe, the route from Darlington joins this line, and then the route to Middlesbrough diverges away from this line shortly after Eaglescliffe. And so I programmed in a Darlington to Middlesbrough service that's, well, running slightly late so that we would get this adverse signal just outside of Eaglescliffe Station. So now that the signal's clear, we've got around half a mile to go to our stop, and just under half a mile to go to an upcoming 50-mile-per-hour speed limit. So before Eaglescliffe, the speed limit drops to 50, and then it goes back up to 60 just before entering the platform. Once this signal is showing a single yellow aspect, we are cleared all of the way into Eaglescliffe Station. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to accelerate up to around 40 miles per hour and then shut off the power and allow the train to coast at that point. So the power shut off. I think I can see the platform at Eaglescliffe coming up. It's an island platform in between the two tracks here, which is why the tracks are getting so wide apart. We've now got the 50-mile-per-hour speed limit for the crossover as the line from Darlington and, well, Bishop Auckland as well joins us here. Trains from Bishop Auckland join the East Coast Main Line, go through Darlington, and then they diverge away from the East Coast Main Line, joining this route here before continuing on towards Middlesbrough. Here at Eaglescliffe Station, I want to stop near the end of the platform. Thought I wasn't slowing down enough. Now I think I'm slowing down a little bit too much, so I'm just reducing the braking for a moment. And we should now be stopping in just about the right place. As we depart away from Eaglescliffe here, the speed limit is 60 miles per hour with around 14.5 miles to go to the next stop, which is Hartlepool. As we get towards 60 miles per hour, I once again need to go between idle and notch 1 of power to maintain that speed. And we're going to be coming up on a junction soon where the line towards Middlesbrough diverges away to the right. At that point, we've got around 1.5 miles to go to an upcoming 30 mile per hour speed limit. This is where the line to Middlesbrough diverges away from us. There will be a warning for the upcoming 30 mile per hour speed limit, which is just under 3/4 of a mile from the limit itself. Now passing the 30 warning, I'm just going to allow the train to continue to coast for now, and I'm going to apply the brakes as we approach the AWS for the upcoming signal. Now down to 30 miles per hour, and you can see the 30 mile per hour speed post coming up just ahead. We'll shortly be passing through Stockton Station with around 11.5 miles to go, and immediately after we've passed through the platform here, the speed limit will then be increasing to 50 miles per hour. So the speed limit has now increased to 50, and we can start accelerating at the start of this left-hand curve just here. As we're now approaching 50, once again it's back to idle to notch 1 of power to maintain the speed, and the speed limit will shortly be increasing further to 60 miles per hour. We're just coming up on that 60 mile per hour speed post now, and as we pass the 60 mile per hour speed post, we've got just under 1.25 miles to go to another upcoming 30 mile per hour speed limit. And this is exactly what I meant earlier when I said there's a lot of speed changes along here. The speed limit might not be that high, but you've certainly got a lot of speed changes to remember, especially when you're driving without the HUD. So now passing a warning for that upcoming 30 speed limit. We're on a slight upward grade now of 1 in 135, which will cause us to lose a bit of speed along here. I've made an initial step 4 brake application, and I'll reduce that as we get closer to the limit itself. The 30 speed limit is in force for a junction that's coming up just ahead. So we are still on the upward grade here, so I'm going to go between notches 1 and 2 of power to try and maintain the speed as close to 30 as I can. Lost a bit too much speed there, so bringing us back up to notch 2 once again. Straight after this junction just here, the speed limit is then returning back up to 60 miles per hour. And the grade has now shallowed out, so we can start accelerating up towards 60 at the AWS ramp coming up on the opposite track. Once again, it's back to idle to notch 1 to maintain the speed as close to 60 as we can. We're now passing Billingham Station with just over 7 miles to go. And the speed limit is now increasing back up to 70 miles per hour. I think, if I remember rightly, this is going to be the last 70 mile per hour section on this journey. So even though we've still got quite a way to go, yep, 60 miles per hour is generally going to be the ruling speed limit for most of the rest of the journey after this 70 section. A short burst of thrash there just to get our speed up, and now back to idle to notch one of power again to maintain the speed at 70. We're now coming up on the site of what appears to be a closed station. I'm not sure what station this is, but I am going to look it up and try and caption it in the final video. At this point we've got around 4¼ miles to go. We're now coming up on Seton Cowaru Station with just over 2 miles to go. The next signal after Seton Carew, or Seton Carew, I'm not sure exactly how it's pronounced. You're welcome to correct me in the comments. So the next signal after that station is just under a mile from an upcoming 35 mile per hour speed limit, and that signal is currently displaying a single yellow aspect, so I do have to be prepared to stop at a red. The 35 limit is actually at the next signal, so the signal that would be, or is currently displaying a red aspect. And we're now passing the 35 speed warning, so I've got the brakes on to bring our speed down and ensure that we do stop for that red signal in time. I've now increased the braking as I can see the red signal coming up just ahead, and I wasn't sure that we were slowing down quite quick enough. The signal has now cleared, so we can now start accelerating towards Hartlepool Station. At Hartlepool, the platform on the right-hand track is actually out of use, so all trains seem to be using the platform on the left-hand track, and that's why we had an adverse signal as we waited for that favourite of every train, favourite of everyone's, that pacer to go past, leave the station and come past us. Yeah, I have to say the pace is very much like Marmite. People either love it or they hate it. It seems to be almost equal, actually, personally. I liked riding on them. I found them kind of fun because they were so bouncy. But I don't think they were particularly nice trains. It's just a bus on a freight truck chassis, really. So as we passed the 35 speed post there, we had a third of a mile to go to an upcoming 20 mile per hour speed limit, and the 20 mile per hour speed limit is coming up just at the next signal ahead. Slowed down slightly too much there, but it doesn't matter too much. We're coming towards Hartlepool Station now, so I'm just going to allow the train to coast. We're going to round this very sharp left-hand curve, and then I'm going to brake as we enter the platform. And here at Hartlepool, we need to stop right at the end of the platform. And we should now be stopped in just about the right place. As we departed away from Hartlepool, the speed limit was still 20 miles per hour, with around 18 miles to go to the next and final stop on this journey, which is Sunderland. So I'm just allowing the train to coast at 20 miles per hour for a moment. The speed limit will shortly be going up to 55 miles per hour, but then not too far ahead, the speed limit's then going to be dropping back down to 40 miles per hour. So we've just passed the 55 speed post. We can accelerate as we get towards the overbridge that you can see coming up. Can accelerate just a little bit before it. I'll try and estimate roughly the right place. I couldn't see a clear marker on the track as to the exact acceleration point, but I think this should be about right now for increasing the power. So we're going to go straight up to full power to accelerate up towards 55, but I'm not actually going to get to 55. I'm going to shut off the power at 50 due to the upcoming 40 speed limit. I think we might have actually got to about 51 there, but I've just shut off the power at this point. At this signal we've got just under half a mile to go to the upcoming 40 speed limit. I'm now going to just apply the brakes very lightly to bring our speed down. You can see the 40 speed post just coming up in the distance there. We are now down to 40. We need to go, of course, between idle and notch 1 of power to try and maintain the speed at around 40. The speed limit will soon be increasing, though, up to 45 miles per hour after this sharp left curve here. So we've just passed the 45 post there. Now giving us a low amount of power, and then at the end of this left-hand curve the speed limit is increasing to 60 miles per hour. So now going to accelerate up towards 60, but we've got around 1.5 miles to go to an upcoming 50 mile per hour speed limit. So at the signal that we've just passed on the opposite track, we've got just under a mile to go to the upcoming 50 limit, and the gradient is now going to change here to up 1 in 102, which will of course cause us to lose speed. So I'm just going to wait a few more seconds, and I'm going to cut off the power and allow the train to start coasting down towards 50 miles per hour. We've got a left-hand curve coming up, and just at the end of this left-hand curve is where the 50 mile per hour speed post is situated. And we are still going to be on an upgrade as we pass the 50 post, so I need to go between notches 1 and 2 of power to maintain the speed. The speed limit's now increasing back up to 60 miles per hour, So I'm just going to wait a few seconds until I think there's a viaduct we're about to start crossing. Yep. And now, just before we cross the viaduct, I'm increasing the power. The grade will level at the end of this viaduct. And then once again, it's back to idle to notch 1 to maintain the speed at 60. We're now passing alongside the coast of the North Sea along here, which I think is a very nice scenic section of the route. And I'd actually like to visit this coast in real life. I've never been to the coast this far up, and I think it would be quite nice for me as a photographer, because I love my wildlife and nature photography, and I'm sure I could get some great wildlife shots out here. There's now a visible gradient change, as the gradient is going to change up 1 in 102, and we're going to need to go between notches 1 and 2 of power to maintain the speed. Now there's another visible gradient change as the track levels out, and then there will soon be a downgrade. So I'm going to shut off the power now just before we reach the level part. Actually, I think I should have gone down to notch 1, waited a few seconds first, but yeah, I'll shut off the power now. We've lost a bit of speed, but that's just to prepare us for the upcoming downgrade, where I'm going to have to use the brakes to control the speed. Yeah, from my understanding, when you're using the throttle on an HST, you're not supposed to just go straight to idle. You're supposed to try and drop it to notch 1 for a few seconds first, before cutting back to idle. So we're now starting on the downward grade here of down 1 in 104, and I will need to use the brakes, well, step 1 of braking to control the speed and ensure that we don't break the 60 mph speed limit. Now the gradient is levelling again just after we've crossed another viaduct, so we're back to idle to notch 1 of power to maintain the speed. And now there's another visible gradient change as once again we go back to down 1 in 104, and I need to use the brakes in step 1 to control the speed. So for this section there's not many speed changes, should I say. It's just remembering and noticing all the gradient changes and how you need to react to them. As we cross this bridge, or just before we cross this bridge, the gradient has levelled out once again, so I'm back to idle to notch 1, and then the gradient's going to change to up 1 in 120 towards the next signal. In fact, I think we might already be on that grade, so I'm just going to give us a second notch of power to ensure that we don't lose too much speed along here. Actually, I'm not sure we were on that grade. I think we just saw the grade change there as the signal came into view. We definitely are now on an upgrade, so I will need to use a second notch of power to ensure that we don't lose too much speed along here. Now a very visible gradient change as we go from an upgrade to a downgrade, so we're going from up 1 in 120 to down 1 in 102. I've shut off the power before we crested the hill there, just to ensure that we don't end up breaking the speed limit as we go over, and now the train will coast back up towards 60 miles per hour. The gradient will then shallow again just before the next signal. Gradient has now shallowed once again. As we reach this junction just here, we've now got, sorry, just double checking here. I lost my place on my notes for a moment there. It's around a mile to an upcoming 45 mile per hour speed limit. So I'm just going to allow the train to coast at this point. I'm not going to give us any power, and we can sort of gradually start to lose speed. We're now coming up on Yarm Station with just over 5 miles to go. The grade has now shallowed again, and I'm going to brake lightly for that upcoming 45 mile per hour speed limit as we approach the next signal. Probably braked slightly too early there actually. We're certainly down to almost 45. I'm not sure exactly where that 45 post is ahead. I just used step 1 of braking for a moment, but I could have actually done it at the signal, I think. And now you can see the 45 post just coming up. So the speed limit here is dropping to 45, but soon going back up to 55 miles per hour. We're now passing the 55 mph speed post, and we can accelerate as we reach the grey trackside box just coming up on the left hand side. Give us some thrash here because it's probably the last chance I'm going to have on this journey, as we are getting quite close to Sunderland now, and there's a series of lower and lowering, should I say, speed limits as we get closer to the station, and it's definitely not a particularly fast entry to a station. We are actually on a slight downgrade of 1 in 131, so I'm just going to use a tiny bit of braking to ensure that we don't break the speed limit here. At the phone mast, I believe it's a phone mast anyway, that you can see coming up on this right hand curve coming up just ahead, we've got around 1 and... Oh, sorry, I've lost my place in my notes yet again. 1¼ miles to go to an upcoming 40 mph speed limit, and 3¼ miles to go. Once we've reached that 40 mph speed limit, that will be the highest speed limit before we reach Sunderland. So I'm just going to allow the train to coast along here. The next signal, we've got around ½ mile to go to that upcoming 40 mph speed limit. So just after we've passed the signal, I'm just going to apply some light braking now. Start bringing our speed off. And we're now down to 40 mph, just in time, just with a step 1 of braking from just after the signal there. We now need to go between idle and notch 1 of power to maintain the speed. At this signal now, with the arch overbridge just after it, we've got around a mile to go to an upcoming 20 mph speed limit. At the next signal coming up, we've got just over ¼ mile to go to that 20 limit, and I'm going to apply the brakes just after the signal as we approach the next overbridge. And we're now down to 20 mph, so I'm just going to allow the train to coast. That will give us a notch of power if we lose too much speed along here. Now going to go through the first of 2 tunnels with just a very small gap in between. Then there's a short open section, and then finally we enter the underground section for Sunderland Station. I must say, when you're in a tunnel this dark, going this slow, it really doesn't feel like you're moving. It just feels like we've just stopped dead. You can now see the gap in the tunnels coming up just ahead. The second tunnel is much shorter, and you can see the end, so it's not quite as dark and does at least feel like we're moving somewhat. We are now approaching Sunderland Station, the underground section starting just ahead in a moment. The route joining us from the left with the overhead wires, I believe, is part of the Tyne & Wear metro system. Here at Sunderland Station, I want to stop right near the end of the platform. Stop just before it gets fully dark here, and then the full train should be in the station, and we should now be stopping in just about the right place. So I just wanted to say at this point, thank you very much for watching this video. I do hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, then please don't forget to like and subscribe. And for the latest channel updates, as mentioned earlier in the video, you can find me on Facebook with the link to my Facebook page in the video description. Also, if you'd like to sponsor this channel or donate to this channel, then please visit my Patreon page for more information at patreon.com/PTGrail. Again, with the link to that in the video description. And finally, if you're interested in my travel or wildlife photography, then please check out my Instagram page for more information, which is at PTG Travelling. Once again, thank you for watching.